Okay, my name is Ann Carmichael and I work with Leela. And my job is to make sure that you are supported throughout the student financial aid process and that you receive FAFSA completion help if you need it. Now, for public school students in the class of 2021, the Louisiana Department of Education has asked that students complete their FAFSA as a requirement for graduation. I don't know what your situation is on your campus, but the purpose of this is to make sure that students have their monies ready and waiting for them when they do begin college in the fall. Now, because college can be expensive, it's time to start thinking about those expenses and preparing to pay for them. And those include your equipment, books, and supplies like your textbooks, notebooks, a computer if you need one, room and board, which can include your dorm room, your apartment if you're staying off campus, which then might include your electricity, gas, water, and your groceries, your tuition and fees, such as parking, um, oops, your room and board, of course, and then your tuition and fees, such as your parking, library, technology, and athletic fees. Now, most college websites are going to show their tuition only. So do your research and make sure you understand their entire cost of attendance. But the good news is that student financial aid is available from the U.S. Department of Education, the state of Louisiana in the form of the TOPS scholarship, your college or career school, and nonprofit and private organizations like Leela. Now, every year, the federal government provides more than $120 billion in student financial aid. And we just want to make sure that you are receiving your portion. Types of federal student aid include the federal Pell Grant, the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Educational Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, Federal Work Study, and direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans. Now, federal student aid grants do not have to be repaid. So when you receive your financial aid offer from your colleges, you always want to accept the grant money offered. The federal grant family includes the Pell Grant, which is for undergraduates with financial need. FSEOGs are for undergraduates with exceptional financial need. Service grants are for students of military parents. Oh, good, we're still admitting some people. Are for students of military parents who died defending the country following 9/11, and teach grants for students pursuing a teaching career. Now, the Federal Work Study Program provides part time jobs to help pay for your college expenses. So, when you tell the financial aid office that you're interested in federal work study, they're going to consider you for this program. They will begin to offer you jobs if you're interested, and then you have the option of accepting or rejecting those offers. The monies that you do receive through this program are paid directly to you, the student, and should be used to pay for your college expenses. Now, this type of job looks great on your first professional resume. So, with a federal work study job, you will have already have something to add to your resume. Direct subsidized loans are based on financial need and no interest is charged until you graduate or cease to attend. Whereas the unsubsidized loans are for everyone, but interest does begin to accrue once this loan is fully dispersed, usually in the spring semester. Now, nobody wants to have to accept student loans, but if you cannot pay for your academic year, these are a good investment. So you can see that there is a big difference between the unsubsidized and subsidized loans, and you want to accept the subsidized portion first. So when you start to receive your financial aid offers, you can remember this by telling yourself that the U in unsubsidized means that you always pay the interest on that loan. If you are offered loans and you do need them to complete your academic year, always accept the federal student loans first because payments aren't due until you graduate or cease to attend. The interest rate is fixed at a lower rate and no credit check is required. This type of loan is only in the student's name. Whereas with the private loans, most are going to require that you begin making payments while you're still in school, and that can be kind of tricky. The interest rate might be variable, and it's often much higher, and they almost always require a cosigner, which means that you're now going to have to go to a parent or another adult and ask them to become part of your loan and help you repay it if you can't do so. So, to dispel the myth, almost everyone is eligible for some type of federal student aid. And all federal student aid and most institutional and private aid is contingent upon completion of the FAFSA. Now, it launched on October 1st, and it does so every year. And you do need to submit a FAFSA every year that you're in college. Now, financial aid is offered on a first come, first served basis. So you want to make sure you're submitting your FAFSA as soon as possible because we've been told that more than 1 million FAFSAs have already been submitted for next academic year. So you want to get to the head of the line while the money is still available so that you will be offered the maximum award that you're eligible to receive. Now remember that there are going to be deadlines imposed by your colleges, by the state of Louisiana. The top scholarship does have a FAFSA completion deadline. And yes, the FAFSA can be used as your TOPS application. And federal student aid will have deadlines. So make sure you're meeting those timely. You'll want to begin the FAFSA process by collecting all of the documents needed to complete the form. And by doing so, it shouldn't take you longer than 30 to 40 minutes to complete your FAFSA. And those documents include the student and parents' Social Security cards, the student and parents' 2019 federal income tax returns, if you filed one, your W-2s, because there's information on this form that might not be found on your federal tax return. And then bank statements and records of investments, because you will be asked to report those balances as of the date you submit your FAFSA. Now you want to begin the process by creating your Federal Student Aid ID, or the FSA ID, because this allows the student and parent to identify themselves electronically when submitting the FAFSA. And it's going to consist of a username and password that you are going to create. As I mentioned, each student and one of his parents should create an ID. The web address is listed here. It's fsaid.ed.gov. And you want to make sure you're only using your personal information. So students, if you don't already have a personal email address, you want to get that created, because if you use your school email to create your Federal Student Aid ID, then they won't have any way of getting in touch with you after you graduate and that account is disabled. Now, don't share information even with a parent. Don't use your parent's mobile phone as your alternate number on your FSA ID, because that's going to cause some trouble signing the FAFSA. Now, your FSA ID is your electronic signature to sign all federal student aid documents. It is legally binding, and you're going to use it every year that you're in college. So make sure that you're recording it and keeping it in a very safe place. Now, if you don't have access to a computer, oops, I'm going to mute somebody. If you don't have access to a computer when you're ready to get started on the FAFSA, you can always download the FAFSA mobile app, and it's called My Student Aid, and you can use it to submit your FAFSA on your mobile phone or on any other mobile device that has internet access. But if you prefer, you can use the web-based version at fafsa.gov. Now, if the student wants to start on the mobile app to enter the student information and the parent wants to use the web-based version, that's no problem. All the information will be integrated, and you can sign and submit the one FAFSA. You want to begin the FAFSA process by logging in with the student's FSA ID, because the FAFSA is the student's application for federal student aid. The parent FSA ID is going to be used later in the form to transfer their tax information from the IRS into the FAFSA if you choose to, and then again to sign the FAFSA. It's very important that the class of 2021 submit the 2021-2022 FAFSA, because that is the academic year that you are applying for financial aid. Now, if you graduate early, you may also be required to complete the 2020-2021 FAFSA, but check with the financial aid office. Once you're in the form, you're going to see that there are 8 sections that you need to complete before submitting your FAFSA, and those include the student demographics, where the student will be asked to provide his social security number, name, date of birth, personal email address, home address, residency status, and gender. The school selection, where you'll report the name of your high school, the colleges that you would like your FAFSA data to be sent to, and your housing plans on each of those campuses. Next is the dependency status section, where the student will be asked to consider a list of 10 questions that will determine whether he is dependent or independent in the eyes of federal student aid. Then you'll be asked to report the number of dependents living in the student's household and the parent's education. And often parents will ask why their education level is asked for. And it's important that you know that there could be additional student financial aid on each college campus for first generation college students. So parents, answer that question accurately. Then you'll move to the parent demographics, where the parents will report their social security numbers, marital status, and their email addresses. And then you move over into the parent and student financials, where each of you will be asked to report any working wages from 2019 and report any federal benefits you receive, and then report your savings and investment balances. And then it's time to sign and submit. And that's where your FSA IDs will come into play again. Now, once you submit, you will receive a confirmation that you've done so. But as you're moving through the FAFSA, if you need clarification about a question, click on that question mark over to the right-hand side. There's one beside each question. You can also select the hyperlinks that are provided if you're not sure what a term means. You can request a FAFSA online chat, call Federal Student Aid, or call me directly at Leela's FAFSA helpline. But for this session, I'm just going to touch on the most commonly asked FAFSA questions. So if you have one that I don't address, or if something I say prompts you to think of something else that I don't cover, just drop your questions in that chat box below, or contact me individually, and I'm going to leave my contact information for you at the end of the presentation. Now, students must be either a citizen or an eligible non-citizen to complete a FAFSA. If you're not sure what an eligible non-citizen is, that's one of the hyperlinks you can click on there for a more detailed description. So if you are a citizen or eligible non-citizen and you are submitting your FAFSA, but your parents are not, that's fine. You will just enter zeros anywhere in the form that that parent's social security number is asked for. It's important that young men between the ages of 18 and 26 register with Selective Service. So if you haven't already done so, you can register within the form. If you haven't turned 18 yet, that's fine. You can let them know that you want to be registered as of the date you turn 18. And remember that you must be registered, young men, and that doesn't seem quite fair, but young men do have to be registered with Selective Service to receive federal student aid. Only the colleges that you list on your FAFSA in the school selection section are going to consider you for student financial aid. So add all of the schools that you're considering, even if you haven't finished your admissions applications yet. Go ahead and list them on your FAFSA. They'll hold onto your FAFSA data until you do so. And you can add up to 10 colleges each time you submit your FAFSA. If you do find yourself needing to apply to more than 10, there are instructions on this page, and just follow through there or contact us. We're happy to help you. Now, this is quite often a question that we're asked. Am I dependent or independent? And most students think, well, I'm going to be 18, so I must be an independent student. But for FAFSA purposes, you must be able to answer one of these questions and provide a legal document supporting your claim. If you can't, you're considered dependent and you must provide parental information. So remember, these questions are being asked of the student, and I'm going to quickly go through them. The first is, will you be 24 or older by January 1st of the school year for which you're applying for financial aid? Are you married or separated but not divorced? Will you be working on a graduate degree, like a master's or a doctorate degree? Do you have children who receive more than half of their support from you? Do you have dependents other than children or a spouse who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? So this means if you're going into the military and straight to boot camp or basic training, you are still considered dependent because that is considered training. Are you a veteran of the armed forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care? Or were you a ward or a dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor? Or are you in legal guardianship as determined by a court? And it's important to note that legal custody is not always considered legal guardianship. So if you have questions about this, please contact someone to help you through it. Are you an unaccompanied youth who's homeless? Or are you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? As I mentioned, if you can answer yes to just one of these questions and provide a legal document supporting that claim, then you're considered an independent student for FAFSA purposes, and you will not be required to provide parental information. Even if you live alone and file your own taxes and you support yourself, you are still considered dependent unless you can answer yes to one of the prior questions. And the number one question we're asked is, which parent do I report on my FAFSA? So the rule of thumb is that the parent or parents that you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months should be listed on your FAFSA. Now, if you live with both of your biological parents, then that's easy. You just list both of them. But if the parent you've lived with the longest, the past 12 months, is either separated, divorced, or was never married, then you should list only that biological parent on your FAFSA. However, if that parent is now remarried, you must include that step parent. In other words, federal student aid wants to know the financial standing of the household that the student has lived in the longest in the 12 months prior to the date that the FAFSA was submitted. Now, if you're identified as a dependent student, but your parents refuse to provide their information on your FAFSA, you can submit a FAFSA by stating you're unable to provide that information, and you can submit it. But you must contact the school's financial aid office to discuss your situation, because if you don't, you're only going to be offered student loans. And you want to make sure that you are being considered for the grant or the free money as well. So don't be shy about it. Contact them and let them know what your situation is, and they can work with you individually. Now, if you filed a tax return in 2019, the process goes a lot smoother, your information is more accurate, and the student is going to less likely be selected for verification if you link your tax info from the IRS into the FAFSA. And once you do, you will be directed straight to the IRS website. Now, this is why it's important to have your 2019 income tax return in front of you, because the IRS wants to know that the person that's in their site is the person who has possession of that tax return. So say your tax preparer misspelled your name, you have to misspell it on this site. Say you've moved since you filed your return, you have to enter your address exactly as it's printed. And we've seen situations where a tax preparer uses avenue instead of street, or abbreviates avenue, but it's spelled out on your tax return is spelled out, but it's not typically spelled out by you. Please enter information exactly as printed on your return to make sure that this is a successful process for you. But if you're having trouble, you can always call Federal Student Aid or contact me at Leela's FAFSA helpline, and we can help you through it. For students who do not, and parents who do not use the IRS data retrieval tool, probably 99% of the time, each college financial aid office is going to ask you to go to the IRS site, request a tax transcript, and have it sent to the college. So this just makes it a little bit easier on you. And then it's almost time to sign and submit your FAFSA. But please review your student aid report. This is a list of every question you're asked on the FAFSA and your answer to each one. So be sure that you are making any corrections. If you see something that doesn't look right, go back into the FAFSA and make that correction, because you want to make sure that the financial aid office receives accurate information so that they can process your aid as timely as possible. Then you're in the sign and submit section. And this is where your FSA IDs will be used to sign the FAFSA. And you can see that the student is asked to provide his ID, and one of his parents, the parent who created their ID, will sign the FAFSA. Once you do and you submit, you will automatically receive this FAFSA confirmation pop-up. This should either be printed or take a screenshot of it, because this is going to be the one time that you get this much information. Now, the student will be sent a confirmation email from Federal Student Aid, but you will not see as much info. And that will include the confirmation number, which shows the date and time you submitted your FAFSA. Some students contact us and say, LSU says they didn't get my FAFSA. And I tell them, look at your confirmation page and call them back and say, this is my confirmation number. There's a data release number printed here. Say LSU or Centenary asks you to make some corrections on your FAFSA. You can say, would you please do it for me? Here's my data release number. You'll find information on the next steps that you need to take to complete the student financial aid process. You'll see a list of the schools that are going to receive your FAFSA data. And you will be able to review your financial aid estimates. And I'm going to emphasize the word estimate because everybody gets excited when they see the dollar amounts. But it's important to note that this is just a generic form, and these are just dollar amounts that are going to be recommended to your colleges. And then the colleges themselves will be making your financial aid offers. Now, if you begin a FAFSA without completing it, you will receive word from financial aid that you haven't submitted yet. And at that time, you will need to log back in and complete the process. Now, if you wait longer than 45 days to complete and submit, your FAFSA data will be wiped out. And when you log back in on that 46th day, you will be beginning from the beginning. Once you do submit your FAFSA, if you need to make a correction, there are a variety of ways, but the quickest way is go back to FAFSA.gov, log in with the student's FSA ID, and make that correction. But when you do, make sure that you are signing and submitting your FAFSA each time. There's really no limit as to how many times you can make FAFSA corrections. But you just want to make sure you do this timely because every time you resubmit your FAFSA, the financial aid office has to review it, and that could hold up your financial aid offer. Now, once it is fully processed, which usually takes about 3 to 5 days, it's then shared with your colleges. At that time, every college financial aid office that's listed on your FAFSA will begin to identify any aid that you might be eligible to receive. Now, if your family's financial situation has changed since 2019, and we're going to see this all over the country, but specifically in Louisiana, with all of the storms that have blown through our state, you'll want to contact your financial aid offices because they have the ability to adjust your aid by using their own professional judgment. So if your parents have lost jobs or had a reduction in their work hours, or there have been some unexpected medical expenses that have been incurred, they would want to know that. It's your responsibility to let them know. They're not just going to ask every student who's applied, do you need additional money? But if you contact them, they might have additional grant money to help you finish out the academic year. Because they're trying to determine your net price, which is what you're going to owe. They're going to take their cost of attendance and subtract any monies that they have to offer you so that they can give you an idea of how much money you will need to pay out of pocket for your academic year, or you may have to accept student loans to pay that difference. Now, each college is going to contact you with a financial aid offer, and that financial aid offer should reflect their cost of attendance, any grants, scholarships, work study, student loans that they have to offer you. And remember, this is a recruitment tool. They want to make sure that you're going to their college. So they're looking around for anything that they can offer you financially to go there. But you want to make sure that you are reading over your offers carefully and responding to any additional requests for information from them so that they can quickly process your aid. Once you do make your decision on where you're going to go, you want to accept your financial aid in this order. Scholarships and grants, because this is free money that does not have to be repaid. Then federal work study, because you've earned that money and you don't have to pay it back. And then lastly are your student loans, because this is borrowed money that you're going to have to repay with interest. Now, I know this is a lot of information to absorb. So again, this year, Leela has published the FAFSA completion guide, and it's for the class of 2021, and it's free for all Louisiana high school students. So if you haven't already received your guide, you can email me. I'll give that info to you at the end of the presentation, and I'll be happy to send the guide to you, along with our senior checklist, to make sure that you're on track and ready for college in the fall. But one of the most important topics are scholarships. And I know your counselor has already talked to you about these, but there are thousands of them, and they're offered by colleges, your parents' employers, and community and religious groups, social organizations. Some are merit-based, based on academic achievement or some special talent that you have. Others are based on financial need. Some might cover the entire cost of your tuition, or they could be a one-time award. But either way, applying for and winning scholarships is going to reduce the cost of your education, which bottom line is going to reduce your student loan debt. So talk to your counselor, call the financial aid offices and your admissions recruiters to find out about scholarships that they've heard about. And this year, Leela is offering a $1,000 FAFSA completion scholarship for Louisiana high school seniors that have completed their FAFSA, and also a Choose Louisiana scholarship, which is a $1,000 award for students attending a college in Louisiana. So check out the details and grab those applications off of our website at leela.org. Now, for those of you who are going to pricier colleges and you need additional money to help you meet that net price, and you've exhausted all of your state and federal dollars, scholarships, grants, etc., Leela does administer a nonprofit education loan program, and you can find out about that at leelachoice.org. So now is the time to ask questions if you have them. I'm going to check the chat box in just a minute, but I do want to provide you with my contact information. Here's our helpline, and there is my email address. So give me a second and I'll check out the chat. And Mrs. Anderson says that FAFSA is not required at Evangel, but it is highly recommended as the TOPS application. Now, if you choose not to complete the FAFSA and you are TOPS eligible, you can go to the TOPS website. You can go to the TOPS website and you can fill out the application online there. Does anybody have any specific questions? Has anybody already completed their FAFSA, or have you been applying for any scholarships you want to tell us about? All right, well, you have my contact info. If you want to speak to me directly, I'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you all for joining me this evening, and best wishes to everybody. Have a great senior year. Good night.